Hey, what's up you guys? My name is Amber, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be discussing One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. Now, if the title of the book sounds familiar to you at all, it may be because, one, the book was wildly popular all over the internet several years ago when it came out in 2017, or it may also sound familiar to you because the book has recently been picked up by the streaming service Peacock and does have a TV show coming out in the near future. That's actually why I decided to give this book another read, is because I have seen the trailer for this TV series so many times all over my YouTube page that I'm finally just like, alright, let me reread the book. Before we get too far into the review, I did want to mention a few trigger warnings that were relevant to the text, including anaphylactic death, questionable consent, toxic and abusive relationships, homophobia, drug dealing, cheating, assault, absentee and alcoholic parents, underage drinking, questionable depictions of mental health, including bipolar disorder and depression, as well as mentions of racism, drug use, self-harm, school shooters, and suicide. So if any of these topics are liable to be particularly triggering or bothersome to you, please have extreme discretion while watching the rest of this review or reading the book. So the book follows 5 high school students into detention, with only 4 of them leaving alive. Simon, creator of the school's notorious gossip app, has an anaphylactic reaction to seemingly nothing and is pronounced dead at the hospital. The rest of the classmates, Bronwyn, Addie, Nate, and Cooper, are left wondering what happened and a bit traumatized after witnessing the event and not being able to help him. But when the police start asking questions and reveal that Simon's cup not only had traces of his allergen in it, but that his next post would reveal damaging secrets about the 4 classmates, everyone is left to wonder which one of them is lying. So with the book marketing very heavily referring to the different classmates as the brain, the beauty, the criminal, the athlete, and the outcast, you can definitely tell that the theme of the book was very much The Breakfast Club, but add murder. But then the book itself pokes fun at the teen movie stereotype as though that absolves it from leaning into those tropes. But it doesn't. It'd be one thing if it were done particularly well, or if it were used as a way to genuinely explore the different social archetypes. But it more so just felt like a marketing ploy. Like, people would definitely read, some of the excerpts and have that reminiscence to the movie. So I feel like it was a little bit too heavily relying on that. We do get a ton of information about the characters, so hypothetically they could have been fully fleshed out individuals, but they do a lot of telling instead of showing. So at the end of the day, they do kind of fall a little bit flat, and I really would have loved to have just seen a little bit more of that emotional connection to the characters and to have been able to be a little bit more invested in their stories. That's not to say that any of the characters were unlikable or anything like that. I mean, a few were. None of the main 4 characters. They're all fine. Some of the side characters are definitely insufferable, but intentionally so. You know how it goes, different characters and things. But I just really would have liked to have had more of an emotional connection to any of them, let alone all of them. I could have stood to have seen the book go a little bit darker with the storyline and the secrets that are featured, because you can definitely tell that the intent throughout the book is to never be sure whether you fully trust the characters or not, and to be constantly wondering who did what. And, to have the thought in the back of your head that all of them could have hypothetically been capable of murder. But I really didn't believe that any of them would have been capable or had that intense of a motive, simply because we were told a lot of their backgrounds instead of shown. Whereas I feel like if we were shown a little bit more and had that much more of the emotional investment into their backgrounds and what was actually at stake from their secrets coming out, then we would have been able to actually be like, oh, they may have done it. They may actually be that desperate or that ruthless. And I personally just didn't really get that from reading, even though, I believe that that is 100% the intent. There's definitely, lines here and there that are kind of thrown in to make you wonder, oh, what are they actually hiding? It's got to be the murder plan, right? And then maybe it is, or maybe it isn't. And it just felt a little bit just like too much too late, but also not enough. I know that's a complete contradiction, but you know, just the vibes. So the events of the book are set in San Diego County, which I found to be incredibly amusing to read about because that's actually where I grew up and even currently live. I have always lived around San Diego County areas, so I knew a lot of the places that they were referencing and mentioning throughout the book, which was really fun to read. I think that's just a fun experience for anybody who's reading something like set in their hometown, so they actually understand different places. But having that background is actually why one of the reveals wasn't as big of a surprise as it would have been to other characters. I'm sorry, to other people reading. One of the characters in the book does turn out to be queer, and at one point they do go and try to visit their partner, and their partner lives in North Park, which for those of you who are not familiar with the San Diego area, North Park and its adjacent areas of Hillcrest and places like that are actually known as being like the gay communities of San Diego. Not in a negative or like stereotyped way, that just genuinely happens to be an area with like a very high queer population. There's a lot of different like gay and drag bars and things like that, and it's just very, very wholesome and like positive. But if you're familiar with the area and just the context clues that were leading up to it, I knew what was happening before it was officially revealed. So it was quite comical to me. I was like, oh, I see you. The second half of the book is much more interesting than the first half, which is admittedly a little bit slow at times. So the whole like latter half of the book is definitely a more fun reading experience because, you know, you start to solve the mystery, like there's more action happening, certain things are falling into place and you're learning more information. It's just like the points when the mystery starts to come together, which is generally fun for most people. However, the climax of the book and like the big reveal is a bit questionable in its content. It's definitely interesting, but at the same time, it does leave a bit of a bad taste in your mouth. And I do think that it could have been done a lot better. Like, the concept is very, very interesting, and I am impressed with the author for having the concept, and especially with this being her first novel, if I'm not mistaken. It was written pretty decently, and it was fairly engaging, but just how everything came together in the main climax was just very, very questionable, and I don't know how to explain that without spoiling the ending. So we're gonna leave it at that for a few minutes and come back to it. It's just a little bit tasteless, not entirely, just I could see a lot of people being very, very uncomfortable with the direction that it took. And it's not to say that I think the entire concept wouldn't have been able to work. I just think that there are a few certain aspects that needed to be changed to avoid that line of being insensitive. But since that is vague as hell, I'm actually going to go ahead and spoil the ending for the sake of discussion. If you have any interest in reading the book for yourself and don't want the ending spoiled for you, definitely go ahead and mute the video or just leave now. But for anybody who doesn't really care if the ending's spoiled for them or who has seen it and wants to know my thoughts, stay tuned because we're gonna talk about it. So the big reveal of the book is that Simon wasn't actually murdered, but he kills himself. But instead of just killing himself in a more traditional way, he happened to be the type of person who glorified school shooters and small acts of terrorism, but his additions to the conversations were generally like, school shooting, we've seen it done before, how unoriginal. Like, if you're gonna do it, be original, do something new. And that's exactly what he did. Instead of just killing himself, he decided to concoct this entire plan to frame it as murder and try and ruin the lives of 4 of his fellow students. So he you know, found 4 students that he knew he was going to be able to set up and frame and make look guilty as hell. Now, of course, the mystery is, you know, revealed in the woodwork. More specifically, another student who was an accomplice of sorts had obviously all of the background information that, you know, verifies like what his plan was, but also had what is known as Simon's Manifesto that was supposed to have been mailed to the police a year after, you know, all of the events took place, once Simon's plan was fully in motion and he had irreparably ruined the rest of the other students' lives. And I actually want to read that manifesto because, oof. Here's the first thing you need to know. I hate my life and everything in it, so I decided to get the hell out, but not go quietly. I thought a lot about how to do this. I could buy a gun like pretty much any asshole in America, bar the doors one morning and take out as many Bayview lemmings as I have bullets for before turning the last one on myself. And I'd have a lot of bullets. But that's been done to death. It doesn't have the same impact anymore. I want to be more creative, more unique. I want my suicide to be talked about for years. I want imposters to try to imitate me and fail because the planning this takes is beyond your average depressed loser with a death wish. You've been watching it unfold for a year now. If it's gone the way I hope, you have no clue what actually happened. So that's Simon's statement on the matter, which I don't think I need to tell you is so fucking problematic and insensitive in so many different ways. Just the complete lack of emotion towards the concept of school shooters and just thinking them unimaginative and, you know, boring, when that's a very, very raw and real issue that we have, especially here in America. You know, there are so many different people who have been directly affected by this, let alone indirectly. I mean, anybody who has gone to public school in America the past 30 years has been fucking affected by the concept of school shootings. Like, we all know exactly what to do in the case of them. We have all been drilled to death to be scared of them and to almost expect them. It's not just like a fun thing to mention in your thriller novel, you know, and it's not something to, you know, almost joke about. Like, it's definitely an interesting plot point, but I do think that it could have been handled a little bit more tastefully, or like keep it as is, but at least in the afterword or acknowledgement, like acknowledge the horror and the tragedy that school shootings are, you know, have links to different organizations related to preventing them, or, you know, a portion of the proceeds of the book get donated to different organizations or something. But to have such a heavy topic be involved in your book without any mention of it from the author, I feel like is a little bit questionable and tasteless. And then there's also the topic of, you know, Simon being depressed and, you know, wanting to commit suicide, but that's, you know, almost made fun of as well. And, you know, he pokes fun at other people who have depression and it's almost sensationalized. And I think that it was just a very poor handling of the topic of mental health. And I definitely do think that that could have been handled better. You know, I don't think it should have been handled as is. It should have been characterized a little bit better. The author should have done a little bit more research or had an actual mental health consultant as part of the book. Because that's not even the only aspect of mental health. There is another character featured who has bipolar disorder that could have been represented a little bit better. It's not entirely inaccurate, but also it felt a little bit, again, dramatized and sensationalized in certain aspects. And I just think that that's a little bit damaging, especially with this kind of topic aimed at high school students and teenagers. It just felt very sensationalized, and I do worry about it, especially with a new TV show coming out, if it takes this same theme and if it uses almost the exact same plot points. Like, depending on how they changed it, they could make the TV show really, really good and well done. I don't necessarily have hope for that, especially seeing how some other similar series have been treated recently. Overall, like, the book was definitely interesting, and I'm not going to say that it's a bad book. It's just a little concerning with how they handle some of the content, and I do worry for the impact that it could have on the impressionable youth. You know, getting all parental unit up in this bitch. And I'm not gonna, the end. Like, I remember reading the book for the first time and having this whole book of, like, this murder mystery, whodunit kind of thing, and then it turns out it was a fucking suicide plot and just this whole sensationalized thing. And that's not to, like, you know, be stigmatized about the topic of suicide or anything like that. Like, it is absolutely a mental health issue that needs a lot more destigmatization and help addressed towards it. You know, like, it's not the fact that we're discussing that topic, it's the way that it happened. Like, if you actually know people who are depressed and have suicidal ideation, you'll generally know that, like, this isn't the type of plot that they're thinking. It's not like, oh, let's make this plan to go out in, like, a blaze of glory, except for, you know, the small few. Like, there is definitely, you know, the whole sect of, like, the school shooters who end up killing themselves afterwards and, you know, going out in the blaze of glory type of thing, in their eyes at least. But it's definitely not the most common. I feel like this was a poor depiction of depression being the cause behind it. It is definitely a new take on the, like, high school teen drama kind of scenario. You know, it's definitely an interesting story, so I'm not going to completely knock the book at all. There are just a couple of aspects where, you know. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I had a blast hanging out with y'all. Peace.